Andrew had no idea that this conversation with his neighbor would unravel the life he thought he knew and expose a web of lies hidden in the one place he felt safest, his own home. Before we begin this story, take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let's get into it. Andrew had been looking forward to a quiet evening at home after a particularly grueling day at the office. The exhaustion from endless meetings and deadlines weighed heavily on his shoulders, and he couldn't wait to step into the sanctuary of his home, his place of comfort, his safe haven. He often thought of his house as a fortress, where the outside world couldn't reach him, where everything felt right, and where Olivia, his wife of 5 years, awaited him with a smile that could wash away the day's fatigue in an instant. But as he parked his car and was about to make his way to the front door, something fell off. There, walking briskly towards him from a few houses down, was Henry, his neighbor. Andrew had known Henry for years. They'd shared many Sunday barbecues, chatted about football games, and kept a mutual understanding of respect for one another's privacy. But today, Henry's demeanor was different. He looked hesitant, as if he were holding something back, something important. "Andrew, do you have a minute?" Henry asked, scratching the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. Andrew, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease, gave him a quick nod. "Sure, Henry. What's up?" Henry seemed to deliberate for a moment, glancing over his shoulder as though to make sure no one was listening. Finally, with a deep sigh, he locked eyes with Andrew. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, laced with an undeniable tension. "I've noticed something strange." Andrew's Henry act tightened at Henry's cryptic words. "What do you mean?" Henry shifted uncomfortably before continuing. "There's been a man who's been showing up at your place during the afternoons. He comes around lunchtime, stays for about an hour, and then leaves." Andrew's heart skipped a beat, the world around him suddenly feeling too small and too heavy. A man? What was Henry talking about? He scrambled for an explanation, any rational reason that would clear this confusion from his mind. But Henry wasn't finished. "I didn't want to get involved, you know? I've always kept to myself, but this, I thought you should know. Andrew, this guy, I've never seen him before. He's not like anyone you've had over before." Andrew felt the ground beneath him wobble as if it were crumbling. His pulse raced, and his thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. Olivia had never mentioned anyone visiting. She had always been so private about their home life, yet now this unsettling information was floating in front of him, out of nowhere. His thoughts swirled. Was it a friend of hers? Could it be a colleague? Was it someone she'd been seeing behind his back? The questions began to gnaw at him, but Henry's words pressed into him like a weight. He forced himself to focus on Henry's face, trying to keep his voice steady. "Are you sure, Henry? What man? I mean, did you get a good look at him?" Henry's discomfort was palpable, but he was resolute. "No, Andrew, I don't know who he is. I never got a close look at him, but every time he comes, it's the same routine. He shows up around lunch, stays for a little while, and then leaves. I just thought you should know." Andrew stood there, his mind racing but his body rooted to the spot. "Thanks for telling me," he muttered, his voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and growing suspicion. Henry offered a sympathetic nod before walking away, leaving Andrew to process the bombshell he had just dropped. That night, as Andrew lay in bed beside Olivia, sleep evaded him. Henry's words reverberated in his mind like a drumbeat, growing louder with every passing second. He stared at the ceiling, his mind playing out 1,000 scenarios, each one darker than the last. What could Olivia be hiding? Was there really someone else? Could his trust in her, his rock, the woman he had loved for so many years, be so misplaced? Beside him, Olivia slept soundly, unaware of the turmoil her husband was going through. Her steady breathing was a stark contrast to the racing thoughts that consumed Andrew. He replayed every moment of their relationship, Every argument, every laugh, every quiet night together. Was there a crack in their marriage he hadn't seen? Were there moments she had hidden from him, moments that now seemed so obvious? Andrew's mind churned with uncertainty. He loved his wife. He couldn't fathom the idea of her betraying him. But what if Henry was right? What if something was going on right under his nose? His chest tightened with anxiety. He needed answers. He needed to know the truth. The following day, Andrew took matters into his own hands. He couldn't ignore the growing suspicion gnawing at him. He knew he couldn't confront Olivia without more evidence. It wouldn't be fair to accuse her based on a neighbor's word alone. He needed something concrete, something irrefutable. So, Andrew did what he never thought he would do. He set up a hidden camera in their living room. It was an uneasy decision. The thought of spying on Olivia, the woman he had built a life with, felt wrong, but his need for clarity outweighed his guilt. If there was something going on, he needed to know, and he needed to know for sure. The camera was discreet, placed in a corner of the room where it wouldn't be noticed. Andrew left for work that day, his mind heavy with anticipation. He wasn't sure what he would find, but he was determined to get to the bottom of it. Later that afternoon, when Andrew's shift ended early, he drove home with a racing heart. What would he see when he reviewed the footage? His mind was a storm of possibilities. When he entered his home, the air felt thick, like the calm before a storm. He quickly grabbed his laptop and connected to the camera feed. There on the screen, he saw Olivia laughing, talking, and then kissing a man Andrew had never seen before. The camera had caught it all. The man had arrived just as Henry had described, entering the house at lunchtime and staying for about an hour. He had kissed Olivia, not as a friend, but with an intimacy that made Andrew's blood run cold. The reality of what he was seeing struck him like a punch to the gut. Olivia's betrayal was undeniable, and the man, whoever he was, had become a symbol of everything Andrew feared. His wife, the woman he trusted, had been hiding something from him, something that now seemed far worse than he could have ever imagined. Andrew's world was spinning. He had the proof now, but the questions that followed only multiplied. Who was the man? Why was he in their home? Was Olivia involved with him in ways Andrew had never imagined? And perhaps the most pressing question, was this man married? Was he leading a double life, just as Olivia seemed to be? The raw ache in Andrew's chest became unbearable. He had to know more. The secrecy surrounding this stranger, this mysterious visitor who had come into his life without warning, gnawed at him. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. It didn't take Andrew long to decide on the next step. He would hire a private investigator. The thought made him uneasy. He had never imagined himself in a situation like this, but the intensity of his need for clarity pushed him forward. He couldn't face Olivia with half-truths or assumptions. He needed hard evidence, not just the blurry, uncomfortable suspicion that had taken root in his mind. The very next day, Andrew began researching investigators. He found a reputable agency online specializing in personal matters, infidelity, background checks, and surveillance. The agency promised discretion and professionalism, both of which Andrew desperately needed. He called them, explaining his situation with as much composure as he could muster. "I need you to look into a man who has been visiting my wife," Andrew said, his voice steady but tight with emotion. "I don't know who he is, but he's been coming to my house when I'm not there. I need to know who he is, where he's from, and if he's married." The investigator, a woman named Rachel, listened carefully. She took down all the details and assured Andrew that they would begin their work immediately. She told him it would take a few days to gather information, but she would keep him updated. When the call ended, Andrew sat in his car for a moment, feeling a mix of dread and relief. He had taken action, but now the waiting game began. He could only hope the investigator would uncover something that would explain the mystery. Days passed in a blur. Andrew went to work, tried to keep his mind off the investigation, but every minute felt like an eternity. His thoughts kept returning to that moment. The moment he had seen Olivia with the man. The kiss. The way they looked at each other. His heart burned with confusion, anger, and pain. Finally, the call came. Rachel had results. Andrew arranged to meet her the next day at a coffee shop, away from prying eyes. As soon as he sat down across from Rachel, she wasted no time. "I've got the information you requested," she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "This is about the man your wife has been seeing." Andrew's breath hitched. He grabbed the folder, his fingers trembling. "His name is Alex Grayson," Rachel continued. "He's in his mid-30s, has no criminal record, and works as a financial consultant in the city." Andrew's mind was racing as he flipped through the file. There were photos of Alex, his dark hair, well-groomed appearance, and an air of confidence that seemed to match the man Andrew had seen on the footage. There were details of his work history, addresses, and even a few snippets of his social media activity. But nothing prepared Andrew for what he read next. The most shocking part, Rachel said, pulling out another sheet from the folder. "Alex Grayson is married. He's been married for 5 years to a woman named Emily Grayson, and they live in a suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes from here." Andrew's stomach churned. Mary? That revelation added a whole new layer to the betrayal. Not only was Alex sneaking into his home, but he was also betraying his own wife. Andrew could barely process it. Rachel leaned in slightly, her tone more serious. "From what I've found, Alex's marriage appears rocky. He and Emily have been seen together at social events, but their interactions are distant. I dug deeper and found some activity on his part. He's using dating apps under an alias. It seems he's been seeing other women, including, presumably, Olivia." Andrew's hands trembled as he sifted through the pages Rachel had provided. Photos of Alex and his wife surfaced, a seemingly perfect couple at a charity gala months ago. But then there were also pictures of Alex leaving Andrew's house, walking casually to his car, as if he had no care in the world. "And there's this," Rachel added, sliding another document toward Andrew. "Emily doesn't seem to be aware of what Alex is doing. I found no evidence of her filing for divorce or taking any legal action. She likely believes they're still in a functional marriage." Andrew's heart ached not just for himself, but for Emily, who was clearly being deceived just as he was. The thought of another innocent person being hurt made the entire situation feel even more unbearable. "What about Alex's visits to my house?" Andrew asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel nodded. "From surveillance, it's clear he's been visiting during your work hours, staying for roughly an hour or so each time. It aligns with the times your wife is home alone. It's not uncommon for individuals like him to juggle multiple affairs while maintaining a facade of normalcy at home. He's skilled at keeping his life compartmentalized." Andrew clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Not only had Olivia betrayed him, but she had done so with a man who was just as deceitful, just as willing to destroy lives for his selfish desires. "What now?" Andrew muttered, more to himself than Rachel. He felt lost, consumed by anger and sadness. Rachel didn't press him for an answer. "That's up to you, Andrew. You now have the information. Whether you confront Olivia, Alex, or even Emily, it's your decision. But know this. Whatever you choose, make sure it's something you can live with." Andrew left the coffee shop with the folder clutched tightly in his hand. His mind was swirling with possibilities. Should he confront Olivia directly, armed with the evidence? Should he seek out Alex and demand an explanation? Or should he inform Emily about the double life her husband was living? He decided to pay Emily a visit as soon as possible. The truth is about to surface, but it's only the beginning. If you've enjoyed this story to this point, Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not, and watch this gripping story to the end. Andrew sat in his car, the engine idling outside the Grayson residence. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, wrestling with his emotions. The neatly trimmed hedges and white picket fence surrounding Alex and Emily's house painted an ironic picture of domestic bliss. Yet, Andrew knew the truth. Inside those walls lived a woman blissfully unaware that her husband was leading a double life. Finally, he stepped out, folder in hand, and approached the door. His heart pounded as he rang the bell. Moments later, Emily opened the door. She was a petite woman with kind eyes, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She greeted Andrew with a cautious smile, clearly not recognizing him. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked politely. Andrew hesitated, unsure of how to begin. "Emily Grayson?" "Yes. My name is Andrew. I think we need to talk about your husband, Alex." Her expression shifted to confusion and then worry. "Alex? What about him? Can I come in? This is delicate." Emily hesitated before nodding and stepping aside. Andrew entered the cozy living room, his eyes briefly scanning the family photos on the wall. One showed Emily and Alex on their wedding day, another with a golden retriever that sat lazily in the corner. The evidence of a seemingly perfect life made Andrew's stomach churn. They sat down, and Andrew placed a folder on the coffee table between them. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Alex has been having an affair with my wife." Emily's face froze, her eyes darting between Andrew and the folder. "What? No, that's not." "I didn't want to believe it either," Andrew interrupted gently. "But I have evidence of their affair. I hired a private investigator. Everything you need to know is in here." He slid the folder toward her. Emily opened it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the photographs and detailed reports. Her expression shifted from disbelief to horror and finally to heartbreak. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she clutched the folder tightly. This can't be true," she whispered, her voice breaking. He loves me. We have a life together." "I thought the same about Olivia," Andrew said quietly. "But the truth is, they've both been deceiving us." "I'm sorry, Emily. You didn't deserve this." Emily broke down, tears streaming down her face. Andrew sat silently, giving her space to process the crushing reality. After a few minutes, she looked up, her face pale but determined. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll deal with Alex. He'll have to answer for this." Andrew nodded and stood to leave. "I'm sorry again. I hope you find some peace in this mess." As Andrew drove back home, his resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let Olivia continue to disrespect him, his home, or their marriage. He arrived home that evening, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. Olivia was in the living room, casually scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Seeing her so nonchalant only fueled his rage. "Olivia," he called sharply, startling her. She looked up, confused by his tone. "What's wrong?" "Sit down," Andrew ordered. Her brows furrowed, but she complied, sensing the tension. Andrew threw the folder onto the coffee table, the same folder that had devastated Emily earlier that day. "Care to explain this?" he demanded, his voice cold. Olivia hesitated before opening the folder. Her face paled as she saw the damning photos of Alex entering and leaving their home, the timestamps, and the detailed notes from the investigator. "Andrew, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. "Explain?" Andrew cut her off, his voice rising. "Explain how you've been bringing another man into my house? The house I worked hard to build for us? And you've been sleeping with him while I was at work providing for us?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she tried to stammer out an excuse. "It's not what it looks like. Don't you dare try to blame me for this." Andrew roared. "You had choices, Olivia. You could have talked to me about anything, but you chose to betray me in the worst way possible. Olivia sobbed, her face buried in her hands. I made a mistake, Andrew. Please, we can fix this. I love you. Andrew's laughter was bitter. Love? Is this what love looks like to you? Sneaking around with a married man? Do you know he's been cheating on his wife too? You're just as complicit in destroying someone else's marriage as he is. Olivia looked up, her face streaked with tears. Please, Andrew, don't do this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Andrew shook his head, his voice firm. It's too late, Olivia. Pack your things and get out. I won't live with someone who disrespects me and our marriage like this. Andrew, please, she begged, falling to her knees. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you brought another man into my home, Andrew said coldly. I deserve better than this. Olivia cried harder, but Andrew turned and walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of clarity. His life had been upended, but he wasn't going to let it break him. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she gripped her phone. Her mind raced, desperate to find someone who could help her. In her panic, she dialed Alex, the man she thought she could turn to in this moment of chaos. The line rang once, twice, and then he answered. What do you want, Olivia? Alex's voice was cold, his usual charm replaced by irritation. Alex, she whispered, her voice shaky. Andrew knows everything. He's kicking me out. I don't know what to do. I need you to... Stop right there, Alex snapped, cutting her off. Do you have any idea what you've done in my life? My wife knows now, Olivia. Andrew came to my house and told her everything. My marriage is falling apart because of you. Olivia gasped, tears welling up again. Alex, I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, we can figure this out together. Just figure it out? Alex's voice rose with anger. Do you think this was some great love story? That I'd leave my wife for you? You were just a distraction, Olivia. A way to blow off steam. Nothing more. His words hit her like a slap to the face. She choked on her sobs, trying to find the right words. But I thought you cared about me. You said. I said what you wanted to hear, Alex interrupted mercilessly. You've ruined everything for me. Don't call me again. I'm done with you. Fix your mess on your own. The line went dead, leaving Olivia staring blankly at her phone. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. She was utterly alone. Meanwhile, Andrew stood in the kitchen, sipping a glass of water to calm himself. Olivia's pleading voice drifted from the bedroom, but he didn't care to listen. He had heard enough lies and excuses to last a lifetime. Moments later, Olivia appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. She looked at Andrew, her eyes filled with desperation. Andrew, she said softly, her voice breaking. Please, I know I made a mistake, but can't we work this out? We've been through so much together. Andrew turned to her, his expression cold and unyielding. Olivia, stop. Don't insult my intelligence any further. I warned you not to bring anyone into my house, and you ignored me. You disrespected our marriage and everything we built. Now, you want me to forgive you because you've run out of options. I'm sorry, she cried, falling to her knees. I was stupid. I thought. You thought what? Andrew snapped, his voice sharp. That I wouldn't find out? That I'd just keep playing the fool while you carried on with Alex? You didn't think about me, Olivia. You didn't think about us. And now, you're only sorry because your fantasy came crashing down. She reached out to touch his arm, but he stepped back, his resolve unshaken. You need to leave, he said firmly. I don't want to see you in this house anymore. Where will I go? She sobbed, her voice barely audible. That's not my problem, Andrew replied coldly. You made your choices, Olivia. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences. As Olivia sat on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Andrew turned and walked out of the room. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace, knowing he had taken the first step toward reclaiming his life. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with pain and questions about what could have been. But one thing was certain: he wouldn't let anyone else take his dignity or his peace of mind ever again. With Olivia gone, the house was finally quiet, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy, but Andrew knew he had made the right decision. He was ready to rebuild his life, brick by brick, with honesty and integrity as its foundation. His thoughts drifted to Henry, the neighbor whose courage had set everything in motion. Without Henry's warning, Andrew might have continued living in ignorance, unaware of the betrayal unfolding behind his back. Grateful for the honesty and friendship, Andrew decided it was time to thank him personally. He crossed the lawn to Henry's house and knocked on the door. Moments later, Henry opened it, his face lighting up in surprise when he saw Andrew standing there. "Andrew." "Hey, come in," Henry said, stepping aside to let him in. Andrew shook his head, smiling. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to say thank you." Henry looked puzzled. "Thank me? For what?" "For telling me the truth," Andrew said, his voice steady. "It couldn't have been easy for you, but you did it anyway. You could have stayed silent, but you chose to look out for me, and I'll never forget that." Henry scratched the back of his neck, looking a little embarrassed. "Well, I figured you had a right to know. It's not easy watching a friend go through something like that." Andrew extended his hand, and Henry took it firmly. "You didn't just look out for me. You reminded me of what real friendship is. If there's ever anything you need, you know where to find me." Henry nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Same here, Andrew. Anytime." As Andrew walked back to his house, he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer consumed him. He was free to start anew, and he wasn't alone. He had good friends like Henry by his side. Stories like this remind us of the unexpected twists life can take. If you enjoyed this journey and want more compelling tales, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you hooked.